First, financing. When you found an overseas operation, you have two basic choices: borrow at home and convert, or borrow locally in the market you are operating in. But most of the companies default to borrowing at home. It's familiar, it's best. But at the moment you convert, you carry FX risk from day one. That volatility goes straight to the parent's P&L. So borrowing locally deals with that risk at the source, but it comes with a cost. So let me share with you a real example. We work with one of Taiwan's largest PCB manufacturers. They were setting up a new operation in Thailand. Significant investment, long-term commitment. The question on the table: how do we fund this? The two options. The convert NT directly is simple, fast, but the FX exposure from day one. Or borrow locally in Taiwan. That's a cleaner risk profile, but the local rates were running 4.2% at that model, which were around over 100 basis points higher than borrowing in TIP. So that's the same business result, but a very different risk profile and a very different cost. And that conversation only happened because we had it before the structure was locked in. So more importantly, before discussing hedging tools, we should first ask a simpler question. Can we reduce the exposure at the source? Because ultimately, how you fund determines your risk profile from day one. And that brings me to the second observation: derivatives. Not which instrument to use, but how to think about your risk before you pick anything. So most losses we have seen didn't come from choosing the wrong tool. They come from not having any framework at all. So before you pick anything, a few things worth thinking through. The first, do you understand your full risk picture? So most companies are focused on the directional risk. Which way is the rate going? But the structural risk, currency mismatch, stock exposure that often goes unassessed, that's a different question entirely. So diagnose first, then choose. Second, what kind of risk is it? The flow exposure, then the forward works. The stock exposure, you need cross-currency swap or LDCCS. The mistake we see most, that using short-term forwards to manage long-term FX or stock exposure. And the one that gets missed most. So how does the tool fit your overall structure? The financing and derivative have to be looked at together. That's a part that gets overlooked. And now let me add one more layer to this. And what you see on this slides are central bank's benchmark policy rates. That's the official rates each central bank sets to guide their economy. So India at the top, that's 5.25%. Japan at the bottom, that's 1%. That's over 400 basis points between two markets, directly relevant to manufacturers in this room. And this isn't temporary. Every central bank is playing a different game. That divergence is structural. So when that gap persists, funding currency is no longer just a cost decision, because ultimately it becomes a risk management question. And here is a concrete example of what that looks like in practice. So say you borrow in yen, the rates are around 1%. It's very low. But now you are pairing yen currency risk. So you pair that with a cross-currency swap. The exchange rate gets locked in. The uncertainty goes away. The result? Under the right condition, your all-in cost ends up lower than borrowing in dollar directly. This is a real example of how funding and the derivative can work together to create value. So most companies evaluate the financing and the hedging separate. So, but when those two are considered together, the entire different solution become possible. And that's where the opportunity appears. And the that kind of thinking, financing, and the risk management in the same conversation is really what the third observation is about. It's a multi-market treasury architecture. So when you enter your first new market, that's the time to think about this. Not after the sword or spokes, from day one, because fixing it later always costs more. So in practice, we see companies at the different stages, or some are fragmented, every subsidiary that managing its own accounts, its own risk, on its own. So no visibility across market, duplicated cost. This is where most mid-sized companies are today. Others have a centralized one treasury center, cross-market exposure managed together. Nature hedging actually starts working here, so you can see the full picture for the first time. And the most mature have it fully integrated, the financing and the risk management in the same framework. The treasury isn't chasing the business anymore, it's running ahead of it. So large multinationals often start closer to the top, and mid-sized company almost always start at the bottom. But the shift is possible. So it just has to start early. First market, not force.